What are some things that rich people find surprising or hard to understand about the lives of poor people? So, I've been doing this job for a while now. A couple of years back, I started working for a high-end event planner. I get hired to help set up these extravagant dinners, galas, and so on. Now, I'm not exactly rolling in cash, but I do okay. A little on the lower middle class side, you know? But anyway, that's not the point. A few weeks ago, I got hired for a dinner party, like one of those fancy rich people type events. The guest list had all the big names, CEO types, Hollywood execs, trust fund kids, you name it. My job was simple: make sure everything was in place. Decorations, food, drinks, all that. I'd worked these events before, but this time it was different. I didn't know why at first. The vibe was off, like something was just under the surface, waiting to bubble up. I figured, maybe it's just the stress of trying to make everything perfect for these people who probably won't even notice. Anyway, dinner starts. Everyone's mingling, glasses clinking, the usual. That's when it happened. I'm in the back kitchen area, trying to avoid being in the way, when I overhear a conversation between two of the guests. One of them says, "I don't understand it. How can people not know how to manage their money? It's not that hard. Just don't buy stupid things." The other guest laughs. Right? I mean, it's like, how do they not get it? You're telling me you don't know how to invest? Or save? I froze. This wasn't just a casual remark. It wasn't even criticism. It was pure disbelief. These people genuinely couldn't wrap their minds around the idea that someone might not have enough to save or invest. To them, it was like a basic fact of life, like breathing or walking. Then the second guest says, "Yeah, well, you know what they really don't understand? They don't even know how to budget for their groceries. They just throw stuff in the cart." I couldn't help myself. I had to ask, "What do you mean by that?" The first guest chuckled. "Well, think about it. You have to plan for your meals. If you just buy stuff randomly, you're gonna waste money. They don't get it." That's when it hit me like a freight train. This was their reality. They genuinely didn't understand why poor people couldn't manage their money like they did. I could feel the tension in my chest. I knew I wasn't supposed to be eavesdropping, but I couldn't stop listening. Something in me felt sick. Like they were talking about a different species, not real people who were just trying to survive. A part of me felt small. Another part of me was pissed off. But I kept my head down and finished what I was doing.
Honestly, that's something I've seen a lot in the upper echelons. It's not just how they manage their money. It's the expectation that everyone can be on the same playing field. Like, no one considers the huge disparities in education opportunity and, frankly, luck. I've had conversations with rich people where they talk about budgeting and saving like it's just so simple. They throw around terms like fiscal responsibility and savings goals like it's some universal truth everyone can achieve if they just try harder. What they fail to realize is that some of us don't even have the luxury of a savings account. Emergencies hit harder when your paycheck is already stretched thin. The average person living paycheck to paycheck doesn't have a room to breathe, let alone save. And you know what? That's not their fault, but they don't seem to care. I remember this one conversation with a client where they asked me about investments. I said I wasn't really in a place to think about that. And they just stared at me like I was an alien. "You don't invest at all?" Like, how could I not? I was literally just trying to pay rent that month. It's frustrating because they act like anyone who doesn't have wealth just hasn't figured out the right steps to get there. They don't understand that it's not about steps. It's about access. And access isn't always equal. Yeah, it's wild. They treat it like a choice, like it's a personal failing. But when you don't even have a basic safety net, budgeting isn't the answer. It's survival. How do they not get that?
I kept moving through the event, but I couldn't shake that conversation I overheard earlier. It stuck to me like gum on a shoe, annoying, clinging, impossible to ignore. I was checking on the drinks table when I ended up near Richie Rich and Chloe the socialite. He was the kind of guy who dripped money, watch too shiny, suit too crisp, like he wanted everyone to know. She was nodding along, hanging on every word. "You just have to have vision," Richie Rich said, swirling his overpriced cocktail. "That's what people don't get. Poor people don't think long-term. They live paycheck to paycheck because they choose to. Chloe gasped like he had just unlocked the meaning of life. Oh my God, yes. Instant gratification. That's why they stay poor. I almost laughed out loud. Instant gratification? You mean buying food? Paying rent? Keeping their kids alive? Then Richie Rich lowered his voice, like he was about to say something profound. You know what really shocks me about poor people? They work so much, and they're still broke. I gripped my tray so hard my fingers ached. What's the point? The point is survival, you absolute moron. The point is that people break their backs working, and it's still never enough. I took a deep breath and walked away. Because I needed this job.
Rich people really have no clue. The whole just invest argument is ridiculous when most people can barely cover rent. I used to work 50-plus hours a week in a warehouse, and my bank account still hovered near zero. Meanwhile, my boss would rant about how poor people just don't work hard enough while sitting in his air-conditioned office all day. They genuinely believe poverty is a mindset. Like, no dude, it's math. You can't budget your way out of wages that don't even match inflation. The whole poor people don't think long-term take is hilarious when most of us are out here strategizing which bills we could delay without getting our power shut off.
The night dragged on, and I kept my head down, doing what I had to do. Richie Rich and Chloe the socialite moved on to whatever rich people talk about when they're drunk, and I focused on clearing tables. Then came the part that always made my stomach twist, the leftovers. See, at these high-end events, the food situation is insane. We're talking 5-course meals with tiny portions that cost more than my entire grocery budget for a week. And what doesn't get eaten? It gets tossed. Not donated. Not packed up for staff. Tossed. I was in the back when I saw one of the caterers scraping untouched filet mignon into a trash bin. Perfectly good food, just gone. I must have made a face because the guy sighed and muttered, "Yeah, I know. It's disgusting." Then, like clockwork, one of the guests, let's call him you hedge fund Henry, wandered in, holding his half-full plate. He looked at the trash bin, then at me, and laughed. Man, I always forget how much food gets wasted at these things. Before I could even process that, he shrugged and dumped his plate right on top of the pile. Oh well. Oh well. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. I thought about the nights I skipped meals to make rent. The times I saw a coworker eat plain rice for lunch because it was all they had. The parents I knew who went hungry so their kids could eat. And here was this guy, chucking out a meal that could have fed someone for a day, like it was nothing. I forced a smile and walked away before I said something that would get me fired. Oh my God, this took me back. I worked catering for a bit, and the food waste at these events made me want to scream. The worst part? A lot of them know it's wasteful, and they don't care. Like, I once had a guy tell me, "It's not my problem poor people can't eat this." Man, I still get mad thinking about it. I used to work at a high-end hotel. The amount of untouched food that got thrown away daily could have fed an entire homeless shelter. One time, I asked if we could donate it, and my manager said, liability reasons. Yeah, liability. Because feeding hungry people is just too risky, I guess. I needed air. After watching plate after plate of untouched food get tossed, I stepped outside for a breather. The night air was crisp, and for a second I just stood there, staring up at the ridiculous mansion this event was being held at. Marble pillars, massive windows, everything perfectly manicured. The kind of place where struggling means only taking one vacation this year. That's when I saw you/Janitor Joe. Joe wasn't actually a janitor, but he might as well have been. He worked maintenance for the venue, which meant he was invisible to the guests. Just another person in a uniform who didn't exist unless something needed fixing. He was leaning against the back wall, smoking, looking just as exhausted as I felt. We nodded at each other, a silent understanding between two people on the outside of all this. "You good?" he asked after a moment. I huffed a laugh. "You ever see so much money in one place that it makes you sick?" Joe smirked. "Every damn day." We stood there in silence for a moment before the back door swung open. Enter you/drunken divorcee, mid-50s, wineglass in hand, absolutely wasted. She wobbled on her heels before spotting us. "Oh, there you are," she slurred, pointing at Joe. I need you to get my car. I'm done with these people. Joe blinked. I don't. I know you people work valet, she interrupted, waving him off. Just get my car, okay? And be quick about it. My stomach twisted. You people. Joe exhaled through his nose. I work maintenance. Drunken divorcee squinted at him like he'd just spoken another language. Then she laughed. Oh my God. I'm so sorry, I just assumed. She stopped, looked at me, and then smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. Wait, you can get my car, right? I stared at her. I'm not valet either. Another laugh. Oh, whatever, you all do the same thing. I could feel Joe tense beside me, and for a second, I thought he was going to say something. Instead, he took a long drag of his cigarette and muttered, Lady, your car's probably already at the bottom of a lake. I snorted. I couldn't help it. Drunken divorcee gasped like we'd just insulted her ancestors and stormed back inside. Joe flicked his cigarette away. I hate these people. Yeah, I muttered. Me too. Oh man, this hit home. People like her don't even see us. We're just background noise in their rich person fantasy. I worked retail for years, and the number of times someone assumed I was a janitor, valet, or literally anything except a human being was ridiculous. You all do the same thing, made my blood pressure spike. The entitlement, the disrespect, the absolute audacity. If there's one thing rich people love, it's making sure you know your place. After drunken divorcee stumbled back inside, Joe and I stayed outside for a bit longer, letting the cold air clear our heads. Eventually, though, I had to get back to work. The event was winding down, which meant one thing: drunk rich people trying to sound deep. I was clearing glasses near a small circle of guests when I heard You Trust Fund Tina say, Honestly, I just don't understand how people stay poor. Oh, here we go. Tina was the kind of woman who'd never worked a real job in her life, but loved talking about work ethic. She was perched on a couch, sipping a drink she didn't pay for, surrounded by people who were nodding like she was delivering wisdom straight from the gods. It's just about hustle, she continued. Like, my dad started with nothing, and now we have everything because he worked hard. I almost dropped the tray I was holding. Her dad? The real estate mogul who started with nothing, after inheriting a small $1 million loan from his own father? One of the guys in the group, You Frat Bro Finance, grinned and said, Right? It's all about mindset. Poor people just don't want success enough. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought I might crack a tooth. Trust Fund Tina leaned forward, her voice hushed like she was letting them in on a secret. Like, I know people who work 2 jobs and still struggle, and I'm just like, why not start a business instead? I had to walk away. I had to. Because if I stayed, I might have actually lost it. Start a business? With what money? With what time? These people had no clue. None. They really thought poverty was just a bad attitude, like struggling was a choice. I took a deep breath, shoved my frustration down, and kept moving. Because at the end of the night, I was the one cleaning up after them. This is the most infuriating rich person take. Just start a business. With what capital? Banks don't hand out loans to people barely making rent. Also, guess who has time to think about investments and startups? People who aren't working 60-hour weeks just to survive. I once had a guy tell me, you should just invest in property. Bro, I can't even invest in name-brand cereal. By the time I clocked out, my feet were screaming, my back ached, and my head was pounding from hours of fake smiles and overhearing the absolute dumbest takes on poverty. I stepped outside, pulling my jacket tighter against the cold. The guests were gone, whisked away in black cars and private drivers. The venue was silent now, just a few other workers heading home, exhausted but used to it. Joe was locking up some equipment when he saw me. You surviving? Barely, I muttered. He nodded. Same. We walked to the bus stop together, because unlike the guests inside, we didn't have cars waiting for us. No chauffeurs, no luxury rides. Just the late-night bus, always a little too crowded, always a little too slow. As we sat there in silence, waiting, I thought about everything I'd heard that night. The food waste, the clueless comments, the absolute disconnect from reality. And I realized something. It wasn't just that they were rich. It wasn't just that they had money. It was that they had never known what it was like not to. The bus pulled up, and we got on, just another couple of nobodies heading home.